it was the two biggest ones was him, and there was something with Kanye West, and just like seeing Kanye West like be a person, like actually not like performing for the camera, but just like sitting on his kitchen table was always like, whoa, it was a trip.
All right, we're live. Um, so today we have a guest with a pretty interesting backstory. It's something that I didn't expect. So we have George Boyd with us today, and uh, personally, I think George's journey is kind of wild when you think about it. He started basically it all started with a homemade ramp in the backyard, and fast forward a few years, and he's traveling the world as a professional BMX rider. So that was just the beginning of his journey. Um, After the BMX days, George switched gears completely and dove into video editing, and he went all in. He worked with big names like Disney, CNN, the NFL, and one of my favorite cooks and show people, Anthony Bourdain. So these days, George is running his own service. It's called Cut the Pod, and it's a service that helps podcasters make their video content look top notch. And he's basically taking all the cool stuff that he learned from his video days and using it to help other creators step up their game. So you have a guy that's been a pro athlete, a high level video editor, and now a founder, which brings us why we have him on as a guest today. So George, welcome to the show. Feel free
Lovely
to
to be
introduce
here.
yourself.
Of course. Hey, that was a lovely introduction. I got nothing left to say after that. But no,
Thank you.
really happy to be here and fun to I'm assuming I'm following someone like Elias, so it's big shoes to fill here. So I'm excited to just chat and hang out and share some of that. It's fun hearing how you encapsulated the whole story. You did a nice little job there. But
Thank you.
yeah, it goes from a piece of wood and some bricks to making podcasts 2 decades later.
Yeah, it's a big step up.
Big
So
jump, if you will.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Um, so let me start from the BMX days, right? Can you tell us a little bit, like, go back to when you were a kid and you got interested in BMX days and everything up to the
Absolutely.
point up to the point when you started doing it as a pro,
Yeah.
um, how it all went.
Absolutely. So like I grew up on a dead end in Texas, and we had this circle that just went around our house. End of our road was a cow field. So it was like kind of looked like Texas, and we would do loops around, and one day my dad just was trying to play a trick on us, just took a little piece of wood, put one brick underneath it. We all went over it. My sister and I thought it was kind of cool. And I just was like, oh, that was fun. And so we just hopped on it, and the next time my friends came over, we did it ourselves. And then we got a better piece of wood and put one brick, two brick, three bricks, enough bricks to where you couldn't do it. And then we learned about something called a skate park. And it basically, without getting into the details of like the bike riding, it was just like my four best friends from beginning of life to today, even, like, we just all learned at the exact same time that it was fun to jump your bike, and we all happened to be really good at it, and kind of like grew up together, and we're always able to challenge each other, push each other. And of course, when you're like 12 years old jumping your bike, you want to film yourself and watch it. And so the jump was at my house. My dad had a video camera, so I took the video camera, filmed ourselves jumping, and that just evolved into where you got older. One of our really close friends lived nearby, kind of became like the face, not the face of this sport, but like one of the top riders in the entire sport. And through him, my friend Randy, uh, just introduced us. I would always film Randy, right? And so when you're like filming a top dog, like, you just get into situations and you meet people that you wouldn't have normally been able to meet. So the camera really like helped bring me into situations, and getting to meet people that I probably wouldn't have had a chance to meet if my friend Randy wasn't just a savant and I wasn't his buddy who filmed him. and a lot of those relationships turned into me riding, right? Because he'd ride with Randy, and I was in front of the right eyes, and was fortunate enough to be brought onto the teams with Randy. And so suddenly we were at a place where we were in magazines, we were on videos, we were traveling, and I wasn't filming us anymore. We had people filming us, and it was like quite literally like a dream come true. Like there was days where we'd go on trips, and like the people who I'd be riding with, I had their pictures like in my folders in grade school growing up, and we'd just be in houses traveling with like quite literally like my childhood heroes. And so it's just really fun. Just like it's a fun sport. It's hard. It is a sport because we're like, using our bodies to do something athletic, but like it's such a lifestyle. It's just such like a fun, unique lifestyle to be a part of for
Mhm.
20 something years.
So, at what age exactly did you start?
Fifth
Like,
grade, which would have put me at
no,
like,
no,
I think fifth.
sorry, not start
Oh,
the BMX thing, but when did you kind of go pro, I would say?
I remember I was in college, so I think I was 18 or 19 um, when I first got like legitimate sponsorships,
Mhm.
and I was on those teams 18, 19. I must have then when I was 20. Like you kind of get on a team, you're not pro, you're there with the guys, and then 2 years after being on that team, so I must have been 20. I got the official bump up to the label of pro, um,
Okay.
and
So,
yeah.
and you mentioned trips. Was it in the beginning, was it only around the US or did you go international as well and travel
So
internationally?
most of it was US, but there was trips to London because the
Mhm.
owners of my company that I rode with were based out of London. So naturally we went there quite a bit. And unfortunately, due to injuries, I love to get injured right before European trips. So I'd do all the US trips and then I'd always get hurt. So I missed out on trips to Iceland, Ecuador, um, France, all sorts of lovely places. Um, but they were international trips, but most of them were like eight dudes in a van getting on the highway and driving around and just looking
Mhm.
for fun areas to ride, and trying to make the most out of like what was in front of us. You go to a new city, we wouldn't go to skate parks. We go to like cities and just ride around and try to find out whatever in that town spoke to us to do tricks on. It's just a really fun way to creatively express yourself, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, it was just like a
Definitely.
beautiful way to see the world too. Just a fun way to see a city is by two wheels.
Yeah, and as a person in their 20s or even before that, uh, traveling with a group of people the same age, you also learn a lot about yourself, right? And you're not with parents, you take care of yourself, you're exploring on your own or with friends. So it adds to the uh, it adds to growing up faster
Yeah,
than you should and being
it
more
does.
mature.
And especially when you're with older people who've already
Hmm.
got it together. You'd be
Yeah.
the 20-year-old kind of kid, and you'd be there with people who are parents that have been around the sport for so long, and you're like, oh, I have to really button up a little bit. And you learn quick. Yeah, it's a fair point. And forgive me, where are you based, and have you ever done traveling like that yourself?
Yeah, I kind of drew a line between this because I grew up in Bosnia. I was born in
Uh-huh.
Norway, but I grew up in Bosnia. I was born in Norway specifically because we had a war here, and we came back shortly after when I was a baby, and I spent my whole life in Bosnia
Uh-huh.
until I was 22, I think 23, when I decided after finishing my bachelor's degree, I had a job, I had a girlfriend here, everything, and I just decided, I have to change things up. I've spent my whole life here, so I left everything I had, uh, you know, broke off that relationship,
Wow.
said goodbye to my parents, and went to study in Prague, in Czech Republic,
Wow.
and finished my master's degree there. And since then, I was basically just hopping around. I spent a lot of time in Asia. Um, I'm currently back in Bosnia, just chilling here for a while. I'm thinking of
Yeah,
going to Asia again, but yeah, I'm
good.
I'm kind of traveling changed my life, and going to do my master's degree abroad was the best decision I've ever made. And that's why I was uh, asking you how it felt, because I kind of wish I did it even earlier.
Hmm.
And obviously, I traveled with parents, without parents, but going somewhere alone and just like going into the unknown and risking it, and all of that, the whole thing is beautiful, I think.
That's yeah, it's true. Is when you're solo, it changes the scope of everything. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'd be with groups of people when we'd go on these trips, but I wouldn't know them before the trip. It'd be new people on the team, um, and so it would kind of feel like you're getting thrown into a bunch, into a van. You're gonna sleep in the same room as people you don't know for the next 8 days,
Mhm.
and figure out if you get along or not. And of course, everything goes better if you do. So it was always a fun situation at that age to just get thrown into a van with all these different walks of life and figure it out, you know?
And I mean, as a young person, you see a lot as well. You see different, like, you live through a lot. You encounter different people on the road, and you work with different personalities. You understand that not all people or all cultures and are the same, and people grow up differently, have different habits, and you're thrown into a van with someone. It's it affects you. It
Yeah.
tells you uh, that there's a lot more outside from what you have in your view or what you know already.
It's so true. And even when you're just traveling in the States, like it might seem like it's just one country, but you move over one state and
Yeah,
cultures,
completely different.
everything, yes, so much changes. Like point of
Yeah.
view, you name it. Food, it is a lot of little microcultures over here, and it's easy to dismiss if you stay comfortable. But if
Mhm.
you really get around, it's like, oh, when you cross that river, things are different, you know?
Yeah. I have a cool question regarding this. If you could single out what's one experience from all your travels as a young person that impacted or changed your view of the world as it is?
Ooh. If I had to say one, I think first time I did an international bike trip was in Vancouver, which is not the biggest like leap out of your comfort zone. But
Yeah.
for me, it was like I had only ever done trips that were like close to home with smaller teams, and usually there's a gradual walk up, but for whatever reason I went from that to this trip to Vancouver, and the people that were on that trip were people who I absolutely idolized. Who it was their like, these people were on trip number 86, 87, and it was no big deal, and for me it was trip number one. And just trying to learn how to like find the cadence of the trip, find the cadence of like, hey, like, do I need to be going all out on day one? Make sure that I have to earn these people's respect. Like, just like didn't know the the game, if there even was a game to play. And it was like, trying to figure out what your role is in that group of people who
Mhm.
have made it and are quite intimidating. And look at how that was at the beginning of that trip, and the way I feel like, and like still feel it today, like being at the airport, seeing people get off different planes from different places, waiting at the baggage claim, like, whoa, there's Morgan Wade. Like all these names come off, and you're on a trip with them, and then to think about the end of the trip where it's like, oh, they're just like those are my buddies, like those are my friends. Like there was nothing to figure out. You just people who love similar things getting together and doing that thing kind of like breaches and knocks down so many barriers. So I think for me, it's just like that one thing is that experience and just seeing remembering that feeling at the beginning of feeling like I have to prove myself and I do belong here. And then at the end of it being like, no, like we're just a bunch of buds riding bikes together. And it's as simple as that. And reaching that transition and figuring out it is as fun as it looks was a lovely thing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Um, okay, did you have any? I don't want to go into the unpleasant area, but did you have any
Yeah.
injuries? Because
Yeah.
knowing BMX, it's you can fall, and I personally do jujitsu, and we learn these
Oh,
falls and how you should fall when someone throws you with a judo throw or anything. So falling on concrete, like we fall on the mats, falling on
yeah.
concrete off a bike, midair and everything. It's I
It can
guess
get
it's
you. You get bit every now and then, right? But same thing
yeah,
with jujitsu. Like, it's like there's a price to pay when you're having that much fun.
yeah.
And but I will say, like, it is a skill too. And when you're moving really fast, you know,
Mhm.
and you might be falling from really high, but you're moving so fast, like that momentum can be your friend. Um, if you don't always get to make decisions on what you're gonna do, but you kind of build cat-like instincts over time that save you. And but injuries, yeah, I had a fair number. I mean, did pretty well, but what I loved to do was when I did get injured, it was always at like extremely inopportune times. I had a moment in my life where I was going to Vegas for this big bike conference, and I had meetings with like really big companies like Red Bull and Levi's lined up, and I was going to be on a TV show, and that's when I decided to tear my ACL and knock out all my teeth.
Wow.
So I didn't go to Vegas, and I was probably like, truthfully, a bit of a blessing in disguise when that happened. That was really the only big injury I had. I had broken bones, broke a wrist, some collarbones, things like that that are 6 weeks, a flash and it's gone. But that one was huge for me because I was kind of on the precipice of like going into what would have been like full on professional bike riding, where you might make enough money to like not worry about a job. Um, but instead, I was on crutches and had surgery and got new teeth. And it was I think, 10-month turnaround. And in that times when I decided to really like lean into video. I always was video editing. I was always making videos this whole time, but I was like, all right, well, now it's time to like really pursue this craft. And by the time I was fully healed, I was full on video editing mode. And so I think even though it can sound like I was a victim of the injuries, like I think it was something that helped me out and pushed me into where I was going to inevitably end up anyway.
Mm. So as you get injured and knowing that ACL is that tough of an injury to recover from, what's
Yeah.
going through your head at the beginning? Are you thinking
Oh,
your
so
career's
sad.
gonna fall apart
Yeah,
or
exactly. Yeah, yeah. I was so
okay?
sad just because I knew I had these like m- this trip coming up to Vegas that was
Mhm.
potentially going to be a big deal. Um,
Yeah.
and so I was pretty heartbroken. I think it was like the first time I actually cried as like a male teenager. I was probably 20 at this point, but it was like the first time I like actually allowed myself to feel some stuff at that point when you're kind of trying to be hyper masculine in your life. Um, so it was pretty soul crushing. But
Mhm.
again, it was like a journey that I think had to happen.
Yeah.
And it helped me end up where I am now.
At what point did it happen that is it few months in that you realize like there's no or a few days in that you realize there's no point in just sitting here and dreading what happened? Let's
You
get
know,
into video and figure it out.
thankfully with BMX, like that ACL is a really common injury.
Yeah.
And I had seen people who I knew and loved like tear their ACLs many times. And so often some of the people who I held the most highest respect, held up to the highest respect, when they would get hurt, they would like come out of it a photographer, or they'd come out of it
Mhm.
like running a bike company, and they would I'd hear people talk about like, oh, well, I was out for 9 months, so I just decided to pursue this. And so I kind of had that blueprint already out and had seen people who I really respected like go down and then come out the other side better than they went into it. And so I think I was fortunate to be around that type of mindset for so long, to know like, oh, well, this is just what you do when you get hurt. I had seen it happen so many times, so I just kind of followed suit.
And I guess also like doing an extreme sport, you you kind of get adapted to the fact that you need resilience. You need to build up resilience because that's just the sport that you're in.
Yeah,
Even with martial arts,
I was
I
gonna
go to
say.
every training knowing that I can get injured, and I'm mindful about what I do and try not to get injured, but it can happen, and
Yeah.
I'm ready that if I get injured or God forbid tear my ACL or something, that I have a some kind of plan to recover and a plan on how to continue doing what I
And
love.
it's like, I imagine it's similar with jujitsu and martial arts in general, but like, with one of the beautiful things about extreme sports is like you crash, you fail a ton. You know, like when you try a trick, you try it 40 times, you land it one time. Um, and I'm sure it's the same way with martial arts where you show up and like it doesn't always work out like you envision it, but it's like because you have all those little like micro failures, it builds a pretty cool mindset for that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I can say I used to be, and it would never happen if I kept living here, never explored. But I used to be very oriented towards, something happens and I would look at it, not not uh, by my own decision, but the first reaction would be, why is it happening to me, or
Hmm.
why do I deserve this, or something like that. But growing up and with jujitsu as well, you realize that everything that kind of crushes you a little bit or hurts you is actually helps. So the first 6 months of jiu-jitsu, even though I'm a big guy, I'm 6'3" and
Oh, nice.
220 pounds, you
Hey.
you you train with people that already trained for a while, and you get beat
Hmm.
up for the first 6 months. And after six
Yeah.
months, you actually start doing and being a threat to other people. Um, so it's like going through those 6 months. I don't know if you need to be that type of person or whatever, but it's I would sit being beat up by someone and just thinking,
Yeah.
okay, what could I have done better? And you just go through this process of figuring out it. You have a coach is instructing you, but you still have to go through it and think about, um, you had something that hurt you and you have to fix it. And
Yeah. And you're like,
how do
where did it
you,
go wrong? Let's try
yeah,
again.
how
Yeah.
do you not get caught in an armbar? Again,
Oh gosh.
obviously you're gonna get caught, but
Yeah.
by someone that's better than you. But
Hmm.
how do you not get caught by the same person?
And then every one
And
time it happens, it's less likely to happen the next time, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like this rule of 10,000 hours, and it applies to everything. But it's really there's no giving up. It's just this approach of no, it's cool. I actually get a smile on my face nowadays when my coach comes in a black belt and submits me something crazy,
Yeah.
and I'm like, wow.
Like,
You just
wow.
admire this,
Yeah. Yeah. Because you can
Uh,
make sense of it now, right? Where before you were
yeah,
just getting beat up. Now you're like,
yeah, yeah,
oh,
yeah.
I understand the mechanics that went into what just happened there.
Yeah, but I would
Yeah.
never learn it or learn to appreciate it if I didn't go through this process where everyone was smashing me. And it's the
Yeah.
same for everyone in jiu-jitsu. So it's a cool lesson.
It's
Um,
super, I feel like it's like vital in
yeah.
in my life at least. Like I need to be trying to figure something out and failing. Or else, who knows? I don't know. I've never had the chance to figure out what the other side of that is. I've always been trying to figure something out.
Yeah. That's also I wanted to ask you. So if you could get one lesson that you took from BMX days and apply it to cut the pod and your business
Ooh,
today, it's obviously you have a lot of resilience. If something goes down and something goes to the bad way, you're obviously not gonna give up because you wouldn't even be doing BMX if you tried the trick once and then gave up. You tried
yeah,
it a
yeah.
million times. So what's something that kind of transfers into business nowadays that you
That's
used to do?
that's a I want to think about that. That's a great question. What is it? First thing that comes off the mind is honestly, it's like it's almost kind of like finding out where you can like one of the most beautiful things for me about riding my bike was when I reached the point to where it just felt like an extension of who I am. Like it was like I just understood every movement on that bike so well that it was me. Like there's hardly a separation from where my hands ended and the bike started. It's what it felt like. It just felt like me. And I've reached that in my career in certain places and certain gigs and projects I was a part of for a long time, but I think it's something I want to reach and am working towards with Cut the Pod is like finding a place to where you understand like the problems that you run into so often that it doesn't raise your heart an inch. You're just like, okay, like we're dealing with this is what we're dealing with, and this is what we solve, and this is how we do it. And not saying that you're like a master per se, although it probably translates to that, but it's like just that ability to be one with what you're doing, feel confident even when it's not going well, to know that like we've been here before, we're gonna get out of this one again,
Mhm.
and and that effortless approach to doing something that you have 10,000 reps in, which I don't have 10,000 reps in what I'm doing right now as a founder. So I gotta crash. I probably have to tear an ACL, um, you know, get thrown over and arm barred. I have all that to go through. I've done a lot of it, but I have a lot more to do, you know? So it's just having that mindset of like knowing what it can feel like when you get a lot of it figured out and understanding there's always going to be another problem.
Yeah. And it's when you encounter a problem in business nowadays, is it can you connect it to when you were trying a trick, let's say, I don't know what's it called, like if you're getting up to speed and riding off a wall,
Yeah,
uh,
you can call it a
you
wall
have to
ride.
calculate everything. What's it
Yeah,
called?
a wall ride.
Wall ride. It's
There you go.
quite logical.
Hey,
Um, you have to so you tried it, you failed, and you go back and you think about it. What do I need? Do I need more speed? Do I need to jump a little bit higher? Do I need to do this faster? Do I need to position my body differently?
yeah, or do I just
And
have to throw myself at it and figure out what I need to do too?
yeah.
You know,
So
maybe I
you do
don't
it
know
a
what I
few
need to do.
times and you gather these insights, you recoup, you look at it, and then you try it a million more times and you figure out which details you need to fix. And
Yeah.
do you draw the line with this in business as well? And I feel like you learn this uh, quite the same way as in BMX riding.
Yeah. You know, honestly, like I feel like it's pretty similar. It's just that no longer physical, it's just purely mental. And so that I feel like the biggest difference is like the reset is more difficult. Like physically, you crash, you get up, you go back to where you're starting, and you try again. But mentally, you don't have that like super clear like reset of like, okay, well, we're gonna go start back here and do that again. But I like to look at it as like right now I'm starting off of kicking something off with a new client, and so it's like another rep. It's another try at getting better or pulling it off. But I think the biggest hurdle is that like lack of such a clear reset, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of it's all messy in your brain. And there's none of that ability to walk back up the hill and say, all right, let's go again. You know, you have
Mm.
to like so maybe I'm learning something at this very moment and that it's going to be helpful to just wipe the mind clean and flush it and start from scratch when you need to.
Yeah, I'm in a mental state where I'm thinking about it a lot. Um,
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just, changing your job or changing the location or doing whatever, thinking of it as a reset. I was just watching a video. It's by Zach. I don't remember his last name. He's pretty big on Instagram, and he's saying how a lot of people he knows, and him included, shaved their head and started running or doing different sports,
Yeah.
and that shaving their head kind of felt like a reset on everything, on
Makes a
their
lot of
mindset
sense.
and stuff. And it's a pretty cool approach. Um,
That makes a
so
lot
so
of sense.
Yeah, it's cool to see how different people have different views and ideas to approach this. And I feel like it should be proactive rather than having something happen to you that requires a reset. It's better to
Well,
do it yourself.
I'm
And
talking to the
I'm
master of resets right now with your Bosnia cut ties with everything. I mean,
yeah,
that's the reset of all resets.
yeah, I had to do it. Honestly, it was the best decision of my life. Honestly, it's
Love to hear that.
as a young person, uh, and when you get some context, my parents are they're both. My mom's a doctor. My dad had a security company, and they were both successful in their careers respectively, and raised me and my brother very well and everything. But they were always about safety. This is like obviously after war, going somewhere and coming back and stuff like this. You have two kids. You have to play for safety. But when I was looking at my situation, I was like 20, 22, 23. I had a freelance job and all stuff like this, and I'm like, what do I have to lose? Like, it's the
Yeah,
best time
yeah,
possible to risk everything, and
that's so true.
it still is. I was talking with Elias about this. Um, I'm ready to have kids, but I'm not. I still don't have kids,
Hmm.
and I was just talking to my girlfriend recently. I'm like, this is the best time still to risk it because when in the next year or two when we have kids, it's going to be a little bit more complicated. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
I got a
thinking
three-year
about
old, so I can say that. Yeah.
yeah it's a beautiful point in life, and Elias has a 2-year old and he was just talking about this as well. um, Everything changes, right? You get into this safety mode, and
It's true.
it's right now, or especially when I was 22, it was like guns blazing. You can do anything you want at that time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
um, So let's get. I wanted to wrap up this the BMX era of your
yeah,
life, um, and go on to video editing. So how did you like? It was obviously it wasn't a very big learning curve for you to switch because you've already done video editing. You've also filmed for friends, so you didn't really you had everything ready. So how did the whole? I read that you found a Craigslist gig and you
yeah. It was
applied, and that kind of kicked off the whole thing.
yeah. I was visiting my sister in Los Angeles. I lived in Texas. She lived in LA. I was there for like 2 weeks, and I guess there wasn't a lot going on, and I just decided to apply to some Craigslist jobs. Hopped on the airplane to fly back home, and one of those jobs called me in the airport. Um, and I was like, I talked to the guy. He seemed like legit, but I was like going home. But I didn't tell him because I was like, well, maybe who knows? Maybe I won't get on this plane, whatever. Uh, Took the job. It was a 1 day job on Thursday. And I think it was Tuesday. I flew home, landed Tuesday night, and then just immediately bought a one-way ticket back to LA and left the next evening to go back to LA. And just didn't tell the guy. He just thought I lived in LA. And so went there, worked for him for 1 day. He asked if I could come back tomorrow. I was like, of course, yeah, I'll come back tomorrow. And then that tomorrow repeated for like 2 months. Um, and then eventually I was like, all right, like I gotta like go home and get a different suitcase full of clothes because I've been going through the same clothes for a while. And basically, fast forward, I ended up working for that guy for 9 years, and we went from his guest bedroom. We worked out of his guest bedroom. He had a computer there. His living room had the main computer. I was his assistant, and then his main client was Disney Parks, and we started doing enough work with Disney Parks that they actually asked if we could edit in their marketing, um, internal marketing agency. So that's what we did. We packed up his computers. We actually went to their own computers, worked out of his own computers, and then we started getting other work because people liked to work with us because we were working with Disney, yada yada. We were a team of four at this point, and we moved out of Disney because found ourselves working on other clients' work inside of Disney Studios and thought, maybe it's not the best thing to do for this relationship we have with this client. Leased space from an agency. That agency we were at for a while, and then we grew big enough to where my boss built an entire building. So we went from my guest bedroom. Fast forward 8 years later, we had our whole own building that we were working out of, and it was all him, but we had this amazing team, and so it really, quite literally, was kind of like I was working that Craigslist job for a couple weeks, and I was like, this might be like a real like life-changing thing, and not just like a 2 weeks long situation. And I think it was almost the year that I had been in LA when I was accepted, like, okay, I live here, because the way it happened, like, didn't feel like I felt like a pretty soft commitment. And after a year, I was like, oh man, I, I guess I need an apartment. I need to live somewhere permanently. So that's what I did.
So how's the I was curious about the Disney, just the dynamics in Disney and people you were encountering and meeting there. Uh,
Yeah.
Obviously going from working at your boss's house and just with him to interacting with people that are, working in Disney and doing the job that you love. Um,
Yeah.
that was
Um, it was it was an amazing, like, I feel like everything I do today, even though some of those Disney years were now, it's like 2012 to 2017, 18, um, such incredible formative years of my career because my boss was a pretty high-ranking creative director who loved video. And so his connections were like real legitimate people in the Disney world. Um, he had connections with VPs and executives, and so I didn't know who anyone was, and I was just coming off of being a BMXer. Um, but the Disney dynamic was it was fun, it was highly corporate, right? Like highly corporate. Gray cubicles in squares, what you envision when you think about corporate America. Like, that's what it was.
that's
But
my
inside of those
nightmare.
cubicles were like most of them were freelance powerhouses that probably had ripped and roared through LA for years and were in
Mm.
the part of their life where they needed a little security. Um, and that's what most of the people there were. So most people there had just such incredible stories, and I was the young 22-year-old who was in there. And so people like to tell you their war stories. Oh, when I was your age, I was blah blah blah. And so it's really fun to hear all that and just get to rub shoulders with them, even though not everyone takes you seriously in that corporate environment when you're the young gun.
Mhm.
And the corporate environment quickly became something I learned I cannot exist in peacefully. It's just not healthy for me.
I was just about to ask you that because it's
Yeah.
one of my biggest nightmares, honestly. And you seem like a guy that is completely out of it. So
Yeah, yeah. To go
we're
from
on the
riding
same page.
BMX to like sitting in cubicles was pretty brutal. Thank God it was for a company that was like I knew I was like if I can like not sink in this environment, it's going to be a great thing for me. And still to this day, um, I mean, I feel like it's those years alone that people hire me for. People feel really confident in that they're not taking a big risk when you've said, I worked with Disney for 6 years. Um,
Mm.
but what was really interesting on that corporate front is like, we didn't we were hired by Disney, but we were not employees of them. So we existed in this environment where everyone else had these strict rules, but we didn't have the same rules to follow. We
Yeah.
just had to finish our work. And so it was really interesting to like kind of be a fly on the wall. You're like a double agent, like people can
So you're
complain to you and tell you
like the
secrets, but
supplier basically.
yeah, yeah. Um, so it was really, you feel like, yeah, like I said, you were kind of a double agent. Like you were in the building,
Yeah.
but also people could tell you their secrets and stress out and share their stresses with you and know there were no repercussions because you weren't barking up the same chain of commands they had to bark up.
Mhm.
So it was crazy. It was what you'd hear fun, wild, awful, terrible things and understand what corporate life is like. And you'd go in the bathroom and you'd hear people count down the days till Friday, like 3 more days, guys, stuff like that. And reminds me every day why I'm doing what I'm doing and not driving into the office.
100%. you zoom out a little bit, and it, as a person, I don't want to shoot shots at anyone watching this and
Yeah.
doing a corporate job, but like you zoom out and you're like, what the hell? I feel like in 10, 15 years, people are gonna think, what the hell was I doing the whole
Oh yeah.
time?
Like
Like,
there's some people who are built for it and excel in that world, and there's some people who don't. And I was fortunate to learn in that type of environment that I don't excel there versus like being an actual employee and having to go through like a termination or something. I just got to be like, hey, I don't really like this and
yeah,
pivot, you know?
I have close friends who do corporate jobs, and I mean, essentially we're all different. I have a friend
Yeah.
who's in sales and he excels in a corporate environment, and I don't think he would work in a startup or that he would be a good founder.
Yeah. No, it's true.
And
Like we're all very
and
different.
yeah, yeah, it's just how you work, how you operate. Um, so yeah,
Where you're
how
comfortable. Yeah.
yeah,
The worst
and
part of it though is not sorry to get you, but the very worst part is just like knowing you're done with your work and you were efficient and you did what you had to do, but you can't leave for 2 hours and
yeah,
go live your life. Like I have to sit here until this time. And yeah, there's other stuff you can do to stay productive, but like at that point in my life, it was like I did it, I did a good job, everyone likes it. Now I'm just gonna sit here, just sit.
yeah.
So that was tough. That lack of control.
That what they say that you're renting out your time or renting out yourself, and sitting. Like I was a wild kid. I was like not wild, but I was very energetic, very hyperactive in
Yeah.
in in terms of that. Like I wouldn't listen to someone who told me sit here. Not not
Oh
not
yeah.
not that well.
Yeah.
So even today, if someone told me, "Hey, sit at the cubicle and 9 to 5, and you have to do X, Y, Z," and even I love finishing things quickly.
Yeah.
When I was working as a freelancer, I would deliver a project in half the time because that's how I operate. And I wouldn't just sit there and track additional time because it was planned out. It's There's no point. If I can
Yeah.
finish something faster, I finish it. So it's if someone tells me I finish something and someone tells me sit here for 2 more hours, I just something inside of me boils and I just can't take it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just not for me.
It's
And
a
I
feeling of being trapped. Yeah, it's not a
yeah
good
yeah.
feeling. And
Or
it's never fun to be like,
just another person. We're all the same. Just another
yeah,
person that's a human being as well is telling you that you have to do something, and you
yeah,
don't really have to do it. It's just like what you're accepting.
protocol.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's
The worst part is just when you're penalized for efficiency. It's never fun.
um yeah, it's think for itself. I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you. So obviously, as a video editor, you didn't really have that much connection with people that were in the videos. So, for example,
Yeah.
Anthony Bourdain, you weren't there when they were recording, so you probably didn't get to meet him, right?
It's absolutely
Uh,
true. Yeah.
so,
Like,
did you ever feel like, I don't know, you're editing a video, you kind of relate or admire these people that you're editing their footage and their shows? Um, did you ever kind of feel not left out, but did you feel the need to go and participate in the filming and
no,
everything?
frankly, like I was so happy to be in that position to where I didn't have to be on set in that type of environment, which
Mm.
frankly just is not another place where I don't really feel comfortable and enjoy being. Um, but I honestly, I loved it. I loved being, because what I liked about it was the bit of pressure that comes with it when you're like,
Mm.
okay, like this is a huge name and we have to deliver on the caliber that everyone expects when you hear this name. And you'd study how their videos look, you'd study all sorts of things like why, trying to unpack why this would work or this wouldn't work. And then to just try to deliver on it like without that person in the room, but to just the the fact that it is kind of in a silo is actually what I like the most about it. Like I get to look and ingest like this person's being and brand and how they act and move and feel, and then do my best job to like duplicate it in a way that feels like them.
Okay.
And
That's
they
amazing. I was just about to ask if you have the freedom to actually do that,
we did
or
thanks to my I had the best mentor in the world, and it's almost wrong to call us video editors because we were really kind of creative. Like we never were butts in a seat. Like anytime we became a butt in a seat executing commands, like we'd cut ties with that client. We'd always try to be a creative partner who's helping someone solve a problem, because at the end of the day, like the video editor is the person who is in control of like the footage, and it's like
Mhm.
that's a pretty strong asset. And as a video editor, you can really leverage that because you have the answers to every problem with that video. And there's people ranked above video editors very often whose job is to solve those problems. But I was really fortunate to grow up with someone who showed us how to do more with the position than just execute commands, but to use it as a point of leverage to be like, well, you guys have this problem. Like here's a couple great solutions.
That's amazing. Like it's truly a blessing to have a boss like that. Honestly,
Oh,
and it's not even. I guess it's a wrong word, boss. It's a
yeah, I say
mentor. Or,
mentor. Yeah, I
yeah,
say mentor. I mean, he was my boss, but you know, I ate lunch with him every day. I went to his house when he was out of town. I'd watch his house. He was a friend, like a
nice.
partner in life in a way for a decade of my life.
Are you still in contact?
I'm still in contact, but I don't have the relationship I wish I had. Uh, Not that it's a bad relationship, it's just that he's someone who is very comfortable living in his shell,
Okay.
you know. No, that's why he was such a good video editor, right? Because he's comfortable in his own shell. So he's a very private person who sticks to their own selves, and now I live across the country from him. So, but when I'm in LA, which I'm in LA 3 to 6 times a year, I always try to go out of my way to see him. And I don't have to call him. I can just go ring the door, you know.
That's cool. Yeah, it's like as someone who's very outgoing and stuff. It's a little bit of challenge. It was a challenge for me to understand uh, or work with people that are like that. But in the end, you honestly just start to respect it, and
Yeah.
you don't put too much pressure or anything. You just try to, you understand that they're comfortable seeing you once a month or once a
Yeah.
year, and you can still have a decent relationship, and that's cool. It's fine.
No, it's so true though, like what you said there, and that it's like it's kind of almost like a game to figure out,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
within your own self. Like, okay, like they're
yeah,
okay with it. I mean, I'd love to have a conversation weekly, but instead it's probably 3 times a year. I'd
yeah.
love to share every business problem with them because I would be infinitely levels above where I am now if he had was feeding me advice on the regular basis, but it's just unfortunately not the reality that I live in.
Mm. But it's the game now is how can you take all of the wisdom and all of the habits and all of the good parts of what he did to you as a mentor and
Hmm.
apply it to being a father or being a mentor to someone else or business overall and all of it.
Beautifully said. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
that's it. Yeah, I mean, it's like that's the goal with everything in life is like as it passes you by, like how can you encapsulate parts of it to keep with you forever?
you know what would be really fucking cool if this
Yeah.
guy let you basically do this yourself and figure it out yourself, and after a few years come and say you came to the point where you progressed that much that you needed to figure it out yourself, because that's the last level basically.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's a saying there, the teacher becomes or the student becomes the master or something.
Yeah, that would be really fucking cool.
That would be
If it
great.
happens, please update me on this.
Okay. Yeah, I will.
But yeah, like just taking it out of I can draw a line with like with my dad. It's growing up and as a teenager, as a rebel and everything, I just didn't understand so many things. And everyone I meet and have this conversation with, everyone says the same. At first, you don't understand, you kind of go against the grain and everything, and then you realize, fuck, my dad was right the whole time. All of the advice
I
that he
know.
gave me, he was so right. And I
Yeah.
understand that you can't learn from someone telling you something, you have to feel it on your own skin.
Uh-huh.
But there's so many things that you can look from the side and understand, like, okay, this is something that I want to pass on to onto the next generations. This is the
Yeah.
trait that I think is the best, and so on. um so it's truly just a blessing to have a mentor like that, or
Oh,
just anyone in your life to steer you the right way.
yeah, and it shaped how I worked with someone who was an amazing. She started off as an assistant and became just like my right-hand man for 6 years. She just
Mm.
left this year, which is heartbreaking, but the relationship I built with her was all thanks to a
Yeah,
mentor who
yeah.
showed me how to treat people in a work environment, especially a freelance one.
That's amazing. I think it's just like pulling out these things that you learn from them and putting a little bit of your own spice onto it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, make it your own. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
It's
mean,
like
it
I'm
doesn't
sure
have
you
to
could.
be a completely new concept, but following the principles, making it your own to match your personality and everything. It's just as you were editing the
Yeah,
videos for different people.
that's that's
And
good.
And can you also, sorry to jump that quickly
You're
to
good.
that, but if you're editing, let's say, I go back to Anthony Bourdain. I told you in the
Hmm.
beginning is one of my favorite
Yeah, yeah.
cooks on the TV and everything, and just like had the coolest shows for me because I love cooking and I love food.
Love it. Me too.
Um,
Right there with you.
we can talk about that later on a little bit, but when you're editing his videos, obviously he's this big personality, big character, just like a special human being. And you have all of this freedom. So what happened? What do you decide at that point? You make some you make um, your editing a little bit extravagant, or like
That's
try to
honest.
match.
I feel like that's usually where you get in trouble is when you start trying to do a trick, if you will.
No, no,
You know?
not like not tricks, but
Yeah.
like, let's say if you have a bit more aggressive cuts, let's say
Hmm.
between different footage, or you do
Yeah.
something that kind of spills out energy rather than something that's really calm because it matches this guy was
Yeah.
a tornado. So
Totally. Yeah. Honestly, like when I look back at when you work with those people that are really like intimidating, the craziest part was always getting the footage that's not what ends up on screen and just being like, wow, like I'm just watching him, like the camera's rolling and he's just existing and just
yeah,
having a normal conversation that's like he might not know when the camera's on. You're just like, it's just him and he's just chit chatting. Like that was always the craziest part. And then to be watching that footage and having to make the selects of like, okay, like we're gonna use right here. Like this is how we're gonna show of Mr. Bourdain. We're gonna use this section. And and when you've seen the person on TV for forever, and then you're making the selection of what's gonna be seen by others was a trip. And then yeah, what I worked on with him was like it was a series of, when I say with him, it wasn't with him. He was it was his show when he moved to CNN. So we were
mm,
making the promos for his CNN show. Um, but it was kind of what you explained. Like since it was short and snappy, like you really had to get that Bourdain out in like 30 seconds. So you
yeah.
really had to like find those action-packed, thick, dense moments that got a lot out. Um, but again, like the best part was always just seeing these big personalities like in the raw when the footage is raw and they don't know it's recording. Like it was the two biggest ones was him, and there was something with Kanye West and just like seeing Kanye West like be a person, like actually not like performing for the camera, but just like sitting on his kitchen table was always like,
Mm.
whoa, it was a trip.
I bet if you get the raw footage, and then edit it. Let's say, what's the ratio between the raw footage that you get? So how much footage did you actually see? And then let's say you get 2 hours of raw footage and then it turns into 15 minutes
30
video.
seconds. Like,
30
yeah.
seconds from 2 hours.
Oh yeah, easily. Yeah. Like for instance,
Damn.
yeah, I honestly bet I remember we used to have a ratio. I think it was probably like I think like 9 hours. Again, like you could shoot differently. Like there's a different ways different directors shoot that's more efficient.
Yeah.
Um, but often like we they do B-roll shoots at Disney that would come back with like 9 hours of footage, and that 9 hours of footage would probably turn into like 15 minutes of usable clips. And that's just B-roll, you know. And there's a ton of reasons why. Like you sure you could make it 3 hours of footage, but then you're just repeating the same shot 100 times. So you're like, they film everything to be safe multiple times,
Mm.
and then someone like me got to pull the selects on what makes it to the public eye and what doesn't. Um, so yeah, there's never a good like one for one answer. Like every job's different, but there's a lot of footage that doesn't get used. It's probably like the way Americans treat waste, right? Just
And
like
what do you
throw
do with
everything
it?
away. What do we do? Well, at Disney, we actually helped them build an amazing little proto like system. Um, they'd shoot B-roll, we'd bring the B-roll in, we'd do what we called a pass on it. We'd do one pass through, whatever floated at the top, made it to pass two, whatever floated at the top, made it to pass three. Pass three is what they get to see. And then you do a really crazy backup called an LTO, which is like this tape that is super, super safe and can be stored in like a fireproof safe. And if someone ever needs, for some crazy reason, like there's some lawsuit and you can't show the woman in the blue dress there, you could go back to that tape
Mm.
and see if there is an alternative shot. But
Okay. And what's the how do they pass the data? Is it like external hard drives? There's no cloud stuff or anything. It's
it's all on a huge, enormous, like, called it a SAN. So it's like a server through fiber optic cables inside of the building. So
oh,
it was I think we had three separate servers that were each about 90 to 100 terabytes. Those are B-roll servers, and then there was like a server for current projects that were being worked on.
wow.
So it was enormous. Today, though, I think you could do some incredible things with AI to organize it. But in those days,
Mm.
like it was like that was our job security, as we were the guys that knew their B-roll the best,
Mm.
and so it would behoove them to go hire a new sexy name in town because they'd have to ingest this enormous amount of footage.
Yeah. I have to ask you, do you have a hard stop? Are
I
we
got a hard stop
taking?
at 3:20, and so 15 minutes.
Okay, cool. Can we just go quickly through from obviously from video editing, you stopped working
Yeah,
for this company and you started your own thing.
yeah,
We mentioned it in the beginning, and you're doing it right now. It's called Cut the Pod.
yeah,
So when I said we were not gonna talk about work that much, but this is honestly very interesting to me. I
yeah.
do a little bit of video editing myself, and obviously I have this new podcast, so
That's right.
it's a quite an interesting topic for me. So when did you figure out, there's a market need and you want
Yeah.
to?
Well, honestly, what I did was like pan worked with that company for 8 or 9 years. I was always a freelancer. I was never an employee of that company, so I was always freelancing at the same time. But pandemic hits, and all these producers in LA couldn't access internal, um, what do you want to call it? Like internal, they couldn't use anything inside of the buildings. And so all these producers that I had crossed paths with were reaching out to me in 2019, 2019, yeah. And suddenly I was in a position where I had more work than I'd ever dreamed of because all these employees of these companies, like they couldn't work. But since I was set up at home already, I was able to take on that footage. Not all that footage, but I was able to take on so many projects. So fast forward through the pandemic, come out of it, everything went through a blender. I'm living in Texas after the end of the pandemic. I've moved across the country. And I was doing a lot of work with Meta in the NFL. And I was just like realizing I'm just a freelancer and I work with big companies, but I'm just a freelancer and I need to treat myself more like a business so I'm more secure and smarter and actually thinking about what I'm doing instead of just like relying on hope that the phone's gonna ring. Um, and so I started looking at all the jobs I had done and I chose first I chose e-commerce because I thought it was the easiest way to make money. Realized I didn't really enjoy living and breathing those types of ads. So then I moved on to sports, which is like my world favorite passion is sports. Like I love sports, bikes, balls, you name it. But my issue is I love it so much that it's actually a detriment to myself because if I work on a sports video, I'm going to make it so good to myself, my own belief that it's so good that it's going to hurt me. And it does. And I'll work late. I'll get an idea at 2 a.m. I'll jump out of bed, start working. And then I had a baby and I was like, oh my gosh, like this lifestyle with sports and a baby is brutal because a player could get traded on a video you're working on and you have to redo the whole thing and the deadline doesn't move. And that had happened a couple of times when my daughter was young. So then I was like, okay, like what can I do that I've can still leverage all the relationships I have with colorists and graphics artists and designers and make something great that is going to bring me predictable schedules that are not going to have what we call like fire alarms, which just means like, oh shit moments where like you've just got to survive and get this video out. And I looked at all the jobs I've done. I was like a podcast can answer those questions and someone needs it on a recurring basis, which is pretty rare when you're working in the marketing world. Like usually it's like, oh, there's a holiday, like start working. Um, we got to be ready for Black Friday. We got to be ready for this. These big pushes. But with podcasts, like people typically release on a standard basis, and that was really appealing to me after living kind of a chaotic agency style life for a while. And then I was also realizing like not a lot of podcasts lean into high end production, and that's where I've existed for 12 years. And I can bring on these graphics, so these relationships I have, and really help certain podcasts like excel. Um, and so I work with two people that I love working with the most. I was like, if I'm gonna do a business, I want to try to make it as fun as possible for myself. Um, I think you could argue there's something more fun than podcasts, but what I do is I work with one of my best friends who's an amazing sound composer. He composes like sound for the podcast I work with, and then I work with a graphic motion graphics artist who I just like love the guy as a person, and he's fun to hang out with. And we work together and we make podcasts look cool. So I just tried to build a life that was going to leverage people I like to work with and be predictable now that I've got a baby. And that's how I ended up here.
That's actually a genius decision because like you can't afford things to switch around, especially when your family is your obviously the highest priority. So I think it's a great decision. And obviously you and your team, it must feel like a cheat code for your clients to have you on board as someone in high level video editing and a sound composer and
I
graphics.
hope so, because I like to say I often feel like I'm killing an ant with a bazooka. Like you don't
Mm,
need this level of production,
yeah.
but it can be a really powerful tool for the right people. And it's not for everyone.
So who's for example, I listened to My First Million podcast by Sam Parr and Shampuri.
Oh
They have
yeah.
good production. But who's let's say, are they your type of person or type of podcast that you would do work for, or like who would be the dream client right now as in terms of a podcast that you would love to work with?
Well, so there's like two answers. Like one, I want to make sure I say his name right. Stephen Bartlett, who's Diary of a CEO. Like
Yeah.
to me, that's the North Star. That's like as good as it gets. And that's a machine, right? But honestly, what I would love to like right now, I'm enjoying the clients I'm working with and what I'm building. If I could just like snap a finger, I think athletes, like there's so many athletes with podcasts that are just disasters from a production standpoint And like those guys have all the money to do this, and they often have personal brands that they really care about. So I feel like that's like such a huge fit that I could just absolutely knock out of the park. Is helping athletes who really care about their brand and their look, like look good on their podcast and be able to kind of have something they feel proud about.
Mm.
Because there's so many subpar athletes with personal podcasts that just look rough. Um, so that would be my
I know a
dream.
few in jiu-jitsu that are actually in Austin that
Oh, in Austin? No, no way.
yeah,
Yeah,
that could take they have podcasts, and obviously I follow their content. They have
yeah.
really nice YouTube videos, but podcasts could use some professional production. So
That's so many
um
could, and that they don't
yeah.
all need it. That's the beautiful thing. Like,
And you know what? The content is actually really good. Like when you listen to it, it's they don't just talk about jiu-jitsu, they talk about competition, about life, about I don't know, diets.
oh yeah,
Generally,
especially
they
with the
have
jujitsu, there's a whole
yeah,
lifestyle that goes with it to be able to
yeah,
keep up with
yeah,
the sport. Yeah,
yeah. It's they call each other out. They're trash talking on the podcast.
yeah,
There's no censorship or anything. They're talking about I don't know going out and whatever. So it's like anything happens. So
yeah,
it would
yeah.
probably be fun to edit as well.
I bet it would.
Um,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Uh,
Okay, we have 5 minutes left,
cool.
and I want to step a little bit out. So you like obviously I had a conversation with you for an hour and 15 minutes now. Um, you seem like a very calm person and very, in your own lane kind of, and you seem very um, obviously English, not my native language. I don't know the exact word, but it's the right word is just calm and content, is it? Or I don't know,
Yeah,
just
I'd take that. I'd love that content. Yeah, I'd love to. I'd
so
strive towards that. Yeah.
yeah, you seem like a very, very calm person and in your lane. So do you have any daily rituals or habits or anything
Mm,
that keep you that way? You seem like a very grateful person as well for the work and
gosh.
life you're living. Um,
Well, I'd
so is there
say
anything special that you have?
truthfully, like in my when I close my eyes and I think about how I think I want to live my life, there's rituals that are installed, and then the reality is like I've got a 3-year-old, and it kind of like throws your life in a blender a little bit. You still have control if you take it. Um, but for me, I think the things that I try to do on a regular basis is be outside in nature, like as much as I can, which is not that much. And I need to go on bike rides just to get out there and be by yourself
Hmm.
a little bit, a bit of a cleanse, that reset that maybe we were talking about earlier. And I still ride BMX a good bit. I'm not pushing the limits anymore. I'm more of just have a way to have a lot of fun. And I like to try to get out there and do. But I think the most of it is like recharging my brain in ways that are not work related. Like I love to work. I love to try to solve the problems. I could probably never stop staring at my computer. But when I get away from it and I come back is when I feel the freshest and have the best time working. But it's I just try to, I don't know. I wish I aspired to be someone who had a more like wellness routine. But the truth of it is I just make sure that I have a good time outside in the sun, walking and biking and hanging out with my family, which I don't do enough of, but
Yeah,
I strive
I
for
can
more of it.
I can relate with that 100%. And I think people complicate it. They have these weird routines and meditation and nothing against that, but like
Mm,
it doesn't have to be set in stone. It doesn't have to be all the same as anyone else. Find what works for you, and
yeah,
I feel like you have a thing that works for you, even though you feel like it's not enough.
yeah. But that's life, isn't
It
it? Like the carrot's always in front of you that you're chasing, you know?
yeah, yeah.
So staying
But as
real
someone
with
that
that.
just met you, it feels like it works for you, and
Hey,
and that's
thank
it.
you. That means a
Keep
lot
it going.
because I think I've got a long way to go. but it means a lot. I think being
We all
calm is
think the
a
same, George.
yes, yeah. So maybe the big step is like just figuring out how to feel comfortable with where we all are in the journey and not pushing too
Exactly.
hard.
And be grateful that we're alive. As corny as
It's
it
true.
sounds,
It's a
just like
miracle on its own.
we're
There's a
waking
lot
up
of
every
good.
morning.
There's a lot of
Yeah,
bad and there's a lot of good. It's just like what you focus on, right?
yeah, exactly. What you isolate for yourself, um,
Yeah,
that's 100% it. And I just one last question,
yeah.
and I'll try to keep it short. When you go out on those bike rides that you mentioned,
Hmm.
my guess is that you have 2 different days, and you can elaborate on this. But one day where you just feel like one with the bike and you don't think about anything and you just ride and do tricks. And the second one where when you're actually actively thinking.
Hmm.
Uh, is that
Absolutely.
a pattern that repeats?
That's an amazing, yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. I don't know if there's a pattern. It feels quite random, truthfully,
Hmm.
but
Have you
absolutely.
tried to block it out? Like, is there a day when you really want to
I don't think I can
focus?
control that. I don't know. Do
Uh,
you think you can control that? Like, I don't know if I can.
I'm thinking of that. Like, there's days when, and it's a big topic for me because there's days when, like today in training, everything just flowed. Like I didn't have to
Mm,
force anything. I was doing moves and I was sparring
it's a beautiful
without
thing.
effort. I was in. It's this flow zone, right? Flow
Yeah.
state. Um, and other times I'm just that deep into work, or that work day was rough, or
Hmm.
something that
Hmm.
or something happened that just stays with me, and I'm not following. Like this focus is completely out, and I don't
Yeah.
I don't watch the moves that my coach is instructing. I don't listen to him, or I listen to him partially. And I've been working on it to try to improve this a little bit, but I feel like there's small tools that can help. For example, screen time is affecting me a lot, my
Yeah.
focus, and getting into the flow state on purpose is something that I strive towards, and want to figure out how to
On
do.
purpose. Yeah. I wish I could control that. I, I feel like I'm in a season of life where there's no control right now,
Yeah,
which is my thinking. But it'll come
yeah.
again. It'll come again.
Hmm.
But
It's
I love that to hear that though, because that's what it's all like for me as well. Is there's days where you're got the monkey brain, if I always kind of call it that, where you just can't turn it off. And there's
exactly.
nights with it, and then there's times where you go out there and you practice, you ride, and it's just like you're just you become one with whatever you're doing, and you lose it. And that is when you recharge and go back to work and feel awesome, right?
Yeah. Let's end it on that. That's a beautiful thing to think about, and
Okay.
it's something that it's a that's a pattern. Giving more
Hmm.
time to go on a hike or go do whatever you love, without your phone or without any
Without the
technology, trying
phone,
to
yeah.
to enjoy it and coming back to work. That's a cheat code.
That's
And
yeah, it
let's
is. And it's so simple. It's just hard to keep yourself in line with it, to keep
Yeah,
doing it. It's like you need to
yeah.
be reminded more than you need to be taught.
And controlling yourself on actually forcing yourself to go out and do something that's gonna,
Yeah.
because it's gonna be beneficial, right?
Hmm.
It's gonna
Hmm.
help at work and everything else. All right, George, this was a lovely conversation. It's
It was. I
one
appreciate this. It's a
one
fun
hour and
format, and it feels
15 minutes.
therapeutic a bit, you know?
Yeah, I mean that wasn't the goal, but I see what you mean by that. It's a chance to reflect on habits, on work, on life in general, on
It's
the
grounding
past.
a bit, you know?
Yeah, I don't mean to be, and I have no connection to psychology or anything, but
Yeah.
I think it's just cool to have a conversation with people that think alike, and I think it's gonna be hard to find a founder that doesn't really think alike, because as long as you're an indie founder, you kind of think the same way. So these interviews are gonna go a certain way, and I think with people I interview and yourself included, is it kind of just the conversation flows a certain way, and it's just nice. You don't really have to actively do
You find that
interviewing.
beautiful word flow again, right?
Yeah.
Flow.
Uh, it's used very lightly today, but I think there's something
It's a
to
powerful word. There's a Bruce Lee quote. It's like move, be like water, I think. I don't
yeah,
want to butcher it, but
yeah.
it's something like water, and it's a pretty I think it is
It's
flow at its
be
purest
be
form.
water, my friend, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it means, is
Yeah.
flow.
Like, yeah. Yeah. We're ending with Bruce Lee. We went over 3 minutes over, so
We're good.
I
We're
would
good.
like to thank you once again, George, and
Oh, thank
uh,
you.
for sharing interesting points about your life and habits. And I would certainly want to. I told Elias as the first episode, I told him I want to do it again,
Yeah.
maybe episode 100 or
Uh-huh.
101. So if we get, or no, when we get to that,
Yes. When?
so let's keep the promise as well.
All right.
Um,
Send me the calendar invite for 101. I'll be there.
2026 or something.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, man.
Of course.
Have a
Thank you
nice
so
day.
much. Really appreciate it. And it was like, thank you for asking the questions and being curious enough to reach out. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, man. Have a
All
nice
right.
day.
Cheers.